Good evening and welcome to Planning Committee of Stratford-on-Avon District Council. My name's Councillor Lewis Adam. I'm your chairman for this evening. Some housekeeping to start with. We don't have a fire alarm planned, so if it does go off, please make your way to the exits, and the muster point is the car park across the road by the pub. Please make sure your phones are off or at least in silent mode so they don't disrupt the flow of the meeting. This is a meeting in public, not a public meeting, so only those registered to speak are permitted to do so. I'll call those forward at the appropriate time and give further instructions then. The meeting will be recorded and is being broadcast on our website and YouTube. I believe, I'll now introduce our top table. From Democratic Services, we have Kira Keller. Our solicitor this evening is Sue Mullins. Our planning manager is Alice Cosnett. And our planning officers are Stuart McIver and Sarah Flaherty. And I believe Alice has a statement she's prepared.
Thank you, Chairman. My role is to provide impartial advice and to assist members in their decision taking.
Thank you very much. Okay, we can now move on to the agenda then. Item 1, apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillors Eden, Holmes, Keithley and Ostrander.
Thank you very much. Item 2, disclosures of interest. I'm happy to start. I've had communications from members of the public and CPRE with regards to item 4. I believe those were circulated to other members as well, so that'll be a blanket dispensation. Any further disclosures? Councillor Parry.
Hello and good evening, Chair. I'm the ward member for application number 23/02139/FUL. So I will be stepping down from the panel this evening and speaking as the ward member.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
I was one of the 4 members who paid the site visit this afternoon to the site of application number 5, item number 5, and I've also, on my own, visited the site of application number 4. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I was also a member on that site visit. And Councillor Hedge-Serafin as well. And Councillor Parry. Very good. Any further disclosures? No? Very good. In which case we can move on to item 3, minutes. We've got minutes from meeting held on the 10th of January 2024. I take it everyone's had opportunity to read them, make sure they're an accurate record. All agreed? Agreed. Jolly good. Thank you very much. Okay, we can now move on then to item 4, which is our first application or applications, both held at the same time. We are looking at items 22/01485/FUL and 22/01486/FUL, land north of Oakham Road, southwest of Long Compton. Stuart McIver is our planning officer, and when you're ready, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The application site is land north of Oakham Road, southwest of Long Compton. Members may remember this application was heard at committee in May last year and was deferred to enable the assessment of the need/design of the proposed buildings by an independent agricultural consultant and to enable the submission of photomontages which show the proposed buildings in situ to the landscape. To make things clear, I'll be doing one presentation, but for 2 applications at the site. One application is for the erection of agricultural grain store with hard standing access and associated works, and the other application is for the erection of agricultural store barn with hard standing access and again associated works. So we have the application site at a small scale. You can see the application site denoted by the black dot, southwest of Long Compton. And then again, we have another locational drawing showing the application site outlined in red. You can see that it's encompassed by a field and you have a proposed access which is running adjacent to the field. To the north of the site, you have a footpath which runs roughly east to west, and then to the east of the application site, there's another footpath which runs north to south. So this is the proposed site plan, illustrating the buildings sited next to one another to the northern edge of the field. You can see there is existing tree line which forms the boundary of the field to the north. And then towards the bottom of the slide, you've got just an elevational drawing there showing the buildings. And here we have the proposed grain store plans. Materials consist of dark stained timber-clad walls, corrugated non-reflective metal roof. So the eaves will be 7 metres high with a ridge at 9.5 metres. And then we have the proposed straw barn plans. Again, dark stained timber-clad walls, corrugated non-reflective metal roof. Eaves at 7 metres in height with a ridge at 8.3 metres. So we move on to some site visit images. So this is taken from the field entrance at Oakham Road, looking north towards where the buildings will be sited. You've got a map or an arrow here just to the side of the slide, which hopefully illustrates the direction of the image. You can see that the land descends gently to the northeast, and you can just about make out the vegetation forming the northern boundary of the field. So this is another site photo from the western edge of the field. Hopefully, again, the map and the arrow show where the photo is taken from. Again, you can see the land gently descends towards the northeast. And you can just about make out a hedgerow, broken hedgerow, which is to the south of the buildings, which is denoted on the map here. And then we have this site photo is taken from the east of the buildings, looking west. You can see the existing trees and vegetation which form the northern boundary of the field. And then we move on to another site photo. So this is taken from the footpath to the north of the application site, looking south towards where the buildings will be sited. You can see that the land descends steeply as you head towards the north, and you can just about make out the top of the existing trees, which again form the northern boundary edge of the field. So this site photo is taken from the Rollright Stones, looking southeast, to the southeast of the site, looking northwest towards the application site again, which is denoted by the black dot. And then we move on to the applicant's photo montage, which was requested by members at last year's committee. So this is taken from viewpoint 2 from the applicant's LVIA, which is the adjacent public footpath, looking northwest towards the application site. And this is photo montage viewpoint 2, but this is at year 1 with the buildings in situ, which you can see there. And this is photo montage viewpoint 2 at year 15 with mature vegetation screening the buildings. And then again, we go to the applicant's photo montage. So this is viewpoint 6, which is taken from the western edge of Long Compton, about 1.2 kilometres northeast of the site, looking southwest. And this is as existing. And then we have the photo montage, at year 1, and you can just make out the buildings there. And then we have viewpoint 6 at year 15 with the building screened by the mature vegetation. So in summary, it's considered that the proposed building is required to meet the agricultural need created by the expansion of arable land at Ashby Farm. And whilst the proposed buildings will be visible from some views from the adjacent footpaths and glimpse longer distance views from the wider landscape, overall the effect of the on the landscape character is considered to be limited and not significant. As such, the proposed development is considered to comply with the relevant provisions of the core strategy and NDP, and is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted. Please see the update sheet for updates. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Stuart. Okay, we now move on then to our first speaker, who is Councillor Simon Byng of Long Compton Parish Council. Good evening. So you've got 3 minutes. It's the button on the right-hand side to turn on the microphone. I'm happy to give you a 30-second warning before your time's up. And otherwise, when you're all ready, feel free to take it away.
Good evening. Please may I ask that you look at the pictures being shown whilst I speak. The proposed site sits in the Cotswold natural landscape on the ridgeline above the village of Long Compton. I hope that since the last committee meeting considering this application, you've all visited the site and the surrounding area to understand the visual impact these applications will have if granted. Whilst Long Compton Parish Council acknowledged the principle of development given by the agricultural need of the applicant, it is questionable as to whether this application is necessary or reasonable in its current form. The buildings, as you can see from the photographs, will be clearly visible from nearly all aspects of the village and surrounding area, including the English heritage site at the Rollright Stones. The buildings will be significant in their prominence in the landscape, being on the ridgeline, and this goes against policy E1 of the Long Compton Neighbourhood Development Plan. Whilst we acknowledge that there are other barns along this escarpment, they are all set into the landscape and not on the ridge, as can be seen in the photos. The LVIA sets out that the existing hedgeline and matured trees will shield the site from view. But as we all know, trees are only in leaf for a proportion of the year, and so in the autumn and winter months this shielding would not be present. A recent planning appeal in Long Compton for siting of a dwelling building associated with agriculture has been dismissed, not least for its effect on the character and appearance of the landscape. I quote the planning inspectorate: "The surroundings of the site consist of gently rolling hills and an agrarian landscape with an intermittent open character and expansive views, particularly towards Redcliffe Hill. The character is reflected in the pastoral lowland vale of the Cotswolds AONB Landscape Character Assessment 2002. Dark skies and the absence of lighting also contribute to the rural character of the area. Accordingly, the landscape is highly sensitive to change. Additional landscaping at the site boundaries would help to mitigate against the visual impact of the proposal. However, such screening cannot be relied upon, particularly in winter months when foliage is reduced, and nor can its survival in the long term be guaranteed. Moreover, public views of the proposal will be obtainable from the rising topography, in particular the public rights-of-way around Redcliffe Hill. As such, the extent of landscaping necessary to screen such views of the proposal would itself appear harmful and out of place. This site sat outside the village boundary and in the valley. If this site was deemed to be detrimental to the character and appearance of the area, the site in question here, being on the ridgeline of an escarpment, surely would be even more so. In relation to the construction of the straw barn, it is my professional opinion and experience that a straw barn that is erected for the intention of keeping straw, hay and machinery is an open-fronted barn with cladding on 3 sides and a hardcore base. An example can be seen in the photos. It is not necessary and reasonable for it to be fully cladded and have a roller shutter door. The proposed site is nearly a kilometre from the entrance to the applicant's land, and there's no hard track to the site capable of taking HGVs. Without the installation of the track to these buildings, nothing will be done to reduce vehicle movements from the site. In fact, quite the opposite. As a farm manager of over 5,000 acres, it's in my professional opinion, I cannot see how this application in its current form will benefit the applicant more than if the buildings were sited close proximity to the highway on their land.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Members, do we have any questions for our Parish Council representative this evening? No, nothing forthcoming, in which case thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, our next speaker then is Matthew Chadwick, agent for the applicant. Good evening. So yes, you also have 3 minutes. I'm happy to give you a 30-second warning, and when you're ready, take it away.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening, members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Matt Chadwick. I'm a senior planner for John Phillips Planning Consultancy, and we're the agents for the applications. I'd like to thank officers for their thorough report, which comprehensively covers all of the relevant material considerations. You'll likely recall that committee previously considered the applications last May when they were recommended for approval by your officers. However, the matter was deferred as members asked for an independent review of the agricultural need for the buildings. Visualisations were also requested in order that the visibility of the buildings could be better understood. The requested assessment by an agricultural assessor has been undertaken, confirming the buildings to be needed. The assessment also confirms the buildings to be of appropriate size and design to meet that need. The only query raised by the assessor was regarding ventilation for the straw barn. Following clarification from the applicant, the assessor confirmed the building to be suitably ventilated and fit for purpose. We believe this independent endorsement should give the committee confidence to approve the applications. The applicant has also supplied visualisations of the proposed buildings as requested by the committee. The supplied images allow a comparison of views prior to development, 1 year after completion and after 15 years when landscaping has matured. It's important to stress that these images are verified views prepared to strict technical standards to offer visualisation of the highest veracity. They confirm your officer's conclusion that the buildings will not be harmful to the agricultural landscape. We consider, with these images and the landscape and visual impact assessment which accompanied the original application, the applicant has taken all reasonable steps to demonstrate the developments can be accommodated in the landscape. Similarly, the Council has gone to exceptional lengths to ensure the special character of the landscape is maintained, diligently discharging its duty. Your officer's report assesses all relevant issues and confirms the proposed development will not cause harm, including to the AONB. It also concludes the barns can offer benefits to the rural economy. The positive recommendation is the result of constructive work between the applicant and council, as encouraged by the NPPF, to provide a proposal which allows necessary development to be undertaken while protecting the special character of the area. We wholeheartedly endorse your officer's recommendation the applications be approved and respectfully request that the committee grants planning permission today, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well within your time. Members, do we have any questions for our agent? Councillor Parry first.
Thank you and good evening. I wonder if you can explain for me the rationale behind choosing the location of the buildings so prominently on the ridge line that was highlighted by the previous speaker, particularly when you say you've overcome all the special landscape issues in terms of the character of the area.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think the visualisations are very useful in showing that from the closest public footpath, they would be visible, but not particularly visible, and that's only in the immediate short term. Within 15 years, they're going to blend into the kind of landscape like you'd expect buildings to, farm buildings to do so. And when taken, the view from the village, which is from the northeast, you can see them on the ridgeline, but they're not prominent at all. I think when you'd struggle to see them on that image, particularly after any amount of time when they've blended into the landscape, when you've allowed the landscaping to mature. So this was one of the, the other sightings were considered throughout the farm's holding, but this was the more discrete sighting, and I think the visualisations show that they're not going to be prominent, and that agricultural buildings are a feature that you do see within the rural landscape. And the Cotswold AONB advisor hasn't objected to proposals either.
If I could just follow up, can you just confirm the distance from the public footpath to these buildings, please?
Off the top of my head, I'm not totally sure. It's a couple hundred metres. The first viewpoint was about, it does say on the visualisation, off the top of my head, it's about 200-300 metres. And the second one, which is the one taken from the village, is, I think it's 1.2 kilometres away.
Any further questions for our agent? Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Thank you. The Parish Council, I think their key issue is around the impact on the, and I'm not going to, I think that's for further discussion and debate, but there were a couple of other elements that the Parish Council had raised as of concern. So one of those taps into the dark skies policy and a request for no external lighting. in terms of, is there a requirement for external lighting on the building? I couldn't quite see that there was anything in there, but if the committee were minded to be granting a condition around external lighting, how would that fly as far as your client is concerned?
Yeah, thank you for the question. No external lighting is proposed in the application. Having read the officer's report, it said that external lighting could be conditioned if that was considered a necessary condition to impose. At the moment, nothing is proposed.
Okay.
And it's got, the buildings have translucent roof panels to allow light in, but given their use, there's going to be very little light emitting from those buildings. So.
Okay. And I have a second question, if I may. On a similar vein, the parish council also have concerns about routing of vehicles, and I can see on page 16 of the officer's report that your client did indeed provide a routing plan, which would seem to indicate that your client themselves would not be averse to a routing plan. The county council have made a comment about the enforceability, and this was a question raised in a previous committee meeting. But given the would I be correct in my assumption that, again, were the committee minded to look at some routing plan, that your client would not be averse to that on the basis that they'd already provided a plan themselves, and so a condition along those lines would not be problematic for them? Would that be fair to say?
Yes, I believe that would be fair to say. I suppose it's for committee to decide whether it meets the tests. But yeah, having provided it, they're willing for that to be included as a condition if it meets the tests.
Thank you. Councillor Parry, do you want to come back in?
Sorry, yes, I did want to come back in. When you highlighted the screening, and it was highlighted on the presentation that after 15 years, can you explain the sort of height of the vegetation of the planting that would be done, and why can't it be far more mature from year 1, year 2? 15 years, I don't think I'll be here in 15 years, sadly, but, you know, 15 years is a very, very long time for a village to put up with a blot on the ridge line. So why is the screening not going to be more mature, say, within 5 years? An investment should be put into that in that way.
I think the images are shown as it is now within a year to show, you know, within a year screening will grow slightly, but it's not going to grow a great deal. But then the 15 years, I suppose, is a long-term view of it to see how it's going to appear in the, not in the short term, but in the kind of medium-term future. The screening will grow quicker than that. I think it's just a common thing with these kind of visualizations that they show what the situation is now, what it will be in the very short term, so you can visualize that, and then what it's going to be in the longer term. The screening will grow quicker, and obviously it's not going to be that mature within a year, as the images show, but it will be more mature than, it's not going to take 15 years for everything to grow. But I think that's just a common way of showing it, so you can visualize how it will be in the kind of medium to longer term.
Any further questions for our agent? No, in which case, thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, we'll move on to our final speaker, who's Ward Member Councillor Wally Hoggins. Good evening, Councillor. So, yes, you have 5 minutes. Have to give you a 30-second warning.
Can I just ask that the more realistic visualisation which is going to be shown? I am deeply concerned that I am sitting before you again this evening regarding a planning application for one of the most sensitive areas in the Stratford district. The pictures being shown demonstrate just how sensitive this is. The proposal before you is for agricultural barns, allegedly for the purpose of grain and straw storage that the applicant will use for this land and other land that he farms some distance away. Whilst I would not dream of questioning the justification for needing a barn for these agricultural purposes, I do question the need for these barns to be positioned in such a highly sensitive part of the landscape on the ridgeline, as far away from the access road as is possible to get without actually tumbling over the precipice, but in a position which in residential terms will be very highly desirable. Often at this committee we see procedure being followed, and regrettably procedure has dominated this application rather than resolution. The parish council being clear that they would be agreeable to a barn by this applicant in a less sensitive location, and have even provided proposal pictures in a location which would minimise the impact on the landscape and be less damaging in this highly sensitive area of the countryside. The proposed barn is 1 kilometre away from the road. I know this because I've walked it. The proposed alternative site is just a few metres away from the road and would not be a potential reminder of process gone mad, but rather those involved in planning seeking resolution instead of causing conflict amongst local residents and damage that will last for many lifetimes. I am dismayed that this applicant has not sought to meet with either myself or the parish council in order to seek a solution to needing a barn. And do you know what I would have said if he'd approached? Have a barn with our blessing. Just put it near the road, but not one on a site which will permanently disfigure this Cotswold area of outstanding natural beauty in perpetuity. Not getting in touch implies that this was less about the barn, but more about the location for a structure that was most desired, because everyone knows, as night follows day, that barns with poor access often become redundant and can then become dwellings by following the Class Q regulations. I therefore ask this committee to protect this precious rural landscape and refuse this application. If you need reasons to do this, then referral should be made to planning application 2200716, which has just had an appeal rejected. This appeal refers to a site that is visible from and to the application being considered today. The Inspectorate rejected the application for many reasons, but particular regard was given to the appearance and protected character of the landscape. The Inspector stated that the landscape is highly sensitive to change. He also went on to enforce the fact that any structures within the open countryside would harmfully conflict with the surrounding rolling natural landscape, having an erosive effect on its rural character. The location of this proposal will cause environmental harm in perpetuity. The planning team at the Cotswold National Landscape consists of 1.4 equivalent full-time members, and it covers an area of hundreds of square miles. With regard to this application, they have advised planners of planning protections that the Cotswold AONB has, and have provided information to assist with planners in making the right decision about this application, who need to protect the landscape from this undesirable development. These protections have largely been ignored, which I am discomforted by. I have a copy here for you if you need to make reference to them. The 1.4 members of the Cotswold planning team have a not unrealistic expectation that the vast number of the planning team at SDC will protect the small but very significant portion of the Cotswold landscape that falls within its jurisdiction, and therefore protection and all that makes it so special. And so we are now at committee, and this responsibility lies with you as the final line in defence. It really is a very special part of the district, and it really does need you to protect it. This is not a burden of responsibility. It is precisely why we were elected and why you've been nominated to be on this committee, to protect our district and to make the right decisions about the environment, both for our residents and our visitors, so that they can work, rest and play in safety and in health. Our rural areas are the green lungs of our district. By rejecting this proposal, you'll be standing shoulder to shoulder with the Planning Inspectorate, and you will be on entirely the same page as them, using the same reasons to reject a development as they did only last week, and they rejected any of the mitigations that were offered. I therefore beseech you to reject this proposal because of the harm it will do for generations to come. If a planning inspector can reject proposals for development in this highly sensitive area, then so can you. And finally, I have not seen any evidence of no objection by the AONB, and I am a member of the Cotswold AONB board as appointed by this district council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Well within your time. Members, do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor Hanchester.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for that. Am I correct in you saying that the applicant didn't approach the parish council at all?
No, or me.
Nor you?
No, nor me, nor the parish council, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you. Can I just confirm that the appeal decision you you referenced is land at Butlers Road, Long Compton. Is that right? Okay, it's just so I can understand, because it's one that's been relatively recently circulated to members. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions from a ward member? No, in which case, thank you very much for your contribution this evening. Totally good. Okay, we can now move on then to points of clarification from our officers. Any points of clarification members would like to raise? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 16 makes reference to a net reduction in vehicular movements. Have we got any quantities on that?
Bear with, we're just going to have a look at that, see if we can find that. Thank you. So without the grain store, there would be around 58 movements by tractors and trailers between the farms in a concentrated period. And then with the grain store, this will reduce down to 30 movements.
Right, so it's half, roughly. Okay. Second question.
Go on.
Right. In my experience, which clearly I don't live in Long Compton, but my experience of this site is most viewed from people travelling south on the A3400. As you travel south, you'd see this amazing vista right across the front of your windscreen. It's quite an impressive sight. However, I'm trying to establish in my own mind whether the apex of the roof of these structures, proposed structures, would actually be seen from that vantage point above the line of the ridge, or whether the height of the buildings would actually be lower than the actual ridge. My perception at the moment is that given that the building is 9 metres high and that the contour lines that I'm looking at refer to 250, 225 plus 9 leads me to think that the height of the ridge will be below the ridge of the hill. Is that true or not? Can you tell me?
I think we can only really rely on the photo montage which has been provided, which is slightly off, which is off the A3400. We don't have a photo montage from the A3400, so I wouldn't want to confirm or deny that to be the case.
Thank you. Any further points of clarification? Yes, Councillor Padgham.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask about the conditions, condition 9 on page 17, that it says it will be permitted shall be used solely for the purposes of agriculture and shall not be used for any other purposes other than agricultural operations. Is this something that would work for the future, or is that literally just while they're in operation?
So that condition would be in perpetuity.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
Councillor Pemberton next.
Thank you, Chair. The ward member has raised, in addition to the question around the impact on the landscape, and has referenced a planning appeal decision which members have had circulated, also raised the prospect of a concern around the future viability of the agricultural buildings and the potential risk through a Class Q application that this could become a residential site. What, if any, protection could we reasonably and enforceably secure to guard against that, were the committee be minded to grant?
So you'll note that pages 17 and 18 provide the conditions for the two permissions as recommended. So condition 9 on both permissions would restrict the use of the buildings for agriculture. So the effect of that is that if they were to come in, so first of all, what I will say is they would have to wait 10 years after the building's been in place to apply for a Class Q. At that point, because we have that condition on there, in assessing the Class Q, we have to check that there aren't any other conditions attached to planning permissions on the site which restrict their permitted development rights, essentially, to change use under Class Q. And in this case, having that agricultural use condition essentially means that they fall foul of the permitted development right in as much as they wouldn't be able to benefit from Class Q consent. The reason being that Article 3(4) of the General Permitted Development Order, which sets out Class Q, requires that, quoted, nothing in this order, i.e. the GDPO, permits development contrary to any condition imposed by any planning permission granted or deemed to be granted under Part 3 of that Act otherwise than by this order. So what that means is a Class Q would contravene Condition 9 of the permission, hence it wouldn't be permitted development.
Can I just explore that a little bit further? In terms of the condition, it talks about the purpose of agriculture and shall not be used for any other purposes other than agricultural operations. I'm the farm manager, I need somewhere to live and I've got to make sure I look after the farm. To what extent could we tighten Condition 9 to avoid that particular argument? And I know I'm looking down a rabbit hole here. However, if we were minded to grant 10 years down the line, somebody could be looking at how we came to this and testing the tightness of the condition. And I think if I certainly would be looking for something tighter, I think, there, because when I first read it, agricultural operations could mean anything and could include workers on site or a manager on site, or could be argued that could be something.
So I'm just having a look at our standard conditions. The list in the agenda is kind of like a précis of what we would be looking to attach. So the standard condition would most likely require that it can only be used for the purposes of agriculture, and in brackets have agriculture being defined under Section 336 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended, so that it's clear the definition of agriculture obviously wouldn't include a residential use. An agricultural, the definition of agriculture wouldn't include a residential use, even if it was a farmer living there. So we would make sure that it was clearly just for that purpose. What we could do is we could agree, if members are minded to grant, agree the wording of that condition with the chairman to make sure that he's content that it is as strict as it needs to be. The intention is that it's only used for agriculture and not any sort of residence in association with the agriculture.
And then my final question of clarification comes back to this question of a routing strategy. And we indeed did discuss a routing strategy, and I understand the county's view. What we appear to have is, again, were the committee minded to grant an applicant, at least on the face of it, prepared to do the right thing, if you will. And whilst I accept technically enforceability, should we not try and assist an applicant who wants to do the right thing in at least diminishing at least one of the concerns that the community have? I think the key one is around the impact of the building. But if the committee gets past that, the question I would be certainly looking for routing to be put in, even in the acknowledgement that it is, you know, almost voluntary, but there's at least something there. Your thoughts?
So my view is that routing strategies are very difficult to enforce. It's hard to tell where vehicles are coming from and to, and whether they actually from the site, as you know. What I will say is that if members do consider a routing strategy condition to meet the 6 condition tests, it's within your gift to add that condition. My professional opinion is that it wouldn't meet the test, the reason being that it's not enforceable, and that is one of the 6 tests that conditions need to meet. My view would be as a compromise to add a note on to kind of cover it off. Now, we all know that that's not enforceable either, but at least it sets the tone when the decision notice that this is what is expected. But like I say, that's over to members to decide.
Thank you. Councillor Passingham.
The visualisations of the site shown by the applicant were very different from the visualisations that Councillor Whalley Hoggins showed. Can you, in your professional opinions, which ones are the most realistic?
So the photo montages have been submitted by technical experts and are with the buildings that are drawn to scale. So in our professional opinion, they would be the most likely representation of
That's
the
the
buildings.
applicant's ones.
Yes, the photo.
Yes.
The example of is what's on the screen at the moment. Yeah, the applicant's photo montages.
If I can just add something, obviously this came to committee previously. Photos showing those shadings, it was clearly explained at that committee meeting that those shadings were indicative only. They weren't to represent the scale for the reason that they haven't been properly verified, whereas the photo montages provided by the applicant have been.
Right. So public rights of way, they seem to be closer to the barns than the in terms of this, or has it got to be?
I'm not an expert on the guidelines for undertaking LVIAs because they are quite complex guidelines. My generally, the 2 which have been provided are both public viewpoints, aren't they?
It's Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Chair. My concern relates obviously to the character of the landscape and the screening. We've now had brought to our attention an appeal. The decision was only made last Thursday, where the inspector makes reference to concern for a caravan, not huge barn buildings, but actually makes reference to concern on the mitigation screening can make. What I would like to know, obviously, because this decision has come through last Thursday, the officers haven't been able to consider the decision that was made in this appeal in a similar area with an impact on the character of the landscape. But equally important, the inspector makes, whilst he says additional landscape on the site boundaries would help to mitigate against the visual impact of the proposal, which is for a caravan for an agricultural worker, such screening cannot be relied upon. We've heard this evening from the applicant's agent about a landscaping plan where, you know, it's going to take 15 years. You know, we've had an example of 15 years. I do have concerns that we've had a serious decision from an appeal within...
So, Councillor Parry, can you just come round to a question concise for our officers,
my
please?
concern is, have the officers had the chance to look at the appeal, because it's not in the report, obviously, because the reports were published before the decision was taken. My concern is the weight we can therefore give to the screening, the landscaping, and the decision that was taken on the
Can we
appeal.
go to our officers so they can respond? Thank you.
The officers refused that application. So the inspector was fully in line with how we determined the application. So there was nothing new in the appeal decision that we weren't already doing in terms of assessment. So there was no need to specifically relate to that application in the assessment of that application, because we were already considering those policies with the exact same weight that the inspector did. What I will say is the proposal is very different. I know you've made reference to it. You've implied that a caravan's obviously smaller than agricultural buildings, but my advice would be agricultural buildings are much more sympathetic to a rural landscape than a caravan. So I think that's where they're very different. They're located in very different parts. That's to the other side of Long Compton, to this application site. So in essence, I don't think they're comparable. Coming back to the screening point, if I can, I completely agree. I don't think it's right to determine applications on the basis of screening, because it can't be relied upon. I think, in my professional opinion, looking at the photo montages, the visual impact is acceptable at year one when the screening isn't significantly established. So I think members can obviously have regard to the screening. I don't think they have to rely on it. I think they have to make a judgment as to whether the visual impacts of the scheme in this context are acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Any further points of clarification for our officers? Okay, in which case we can move on to debate. Who would like to start? We'll all jump at once. Councillor Harvey, thank you.
I'm quite happy to start. This is an incredibly sensitive site. I have driven up and down the A3400 for 60 years. I can remember the foot and mouth outbreak in 1968 and the measures that were taken along the A3400, known as the A34 at the time. So I'm familiar with the site. It's a wonderful vista, and it's probably one of the best in the Cotswolds. We have to deal with the application that's in front of us, not an application for a site that might be an alternative site. We've got a consultant's report which says these buildings are agriculturally justified. We've got no objections from statutory consultees, notably Cotswold National Landscape have raised no objection. There's no objection from the local ramblers. The applicant has made a significant effort to ensure that the proposed buildings are as camouflaged, if that's the right word, as possible. I have my own view about where I think it sits in relation to the absolute ridge, but that's another matter. Faced with either approving or refusing, the negative way to put this would be to say, on what basis would we defend an appeal? Given all the information that we've got, given all the responses that we've had, given the evidence that we've got, I'm of the mind that we should go with the officer's recommendation and grant.
Thank you, Councillor. Is that a proposal or just a comment for this moment?
If somebody else wants to propose, that's fine, but I'm quite happy to propose. That's my view at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to go next in the debate? Councillor Passingham.
Yeah, I think it's disappointing that the applicant didn't consider the advice of the parish council or talk to the parish council about the siting of the barns. However, the visual impact seemed very, very minimal to me from the public rights of way. And if, as we're told, these are realistic visualizations, I can't see that we can object on landscape grounds. So I support the application.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. I've been looking at the appeal decision. And whilst I didn't have a 60-year journey along the A34, I know the route well. It is, as the appeal decision talked of, it is an important vista and view, and the landscape is, as described in point 15 of the appeal decision, the landscape is highly sensitive to change. And I'm, even with screening, in fact, to some degree, the additional and extra screening in of itself changes the vista. So we've got this row of trees that were behind, and we're now going to have an additional set of screening which is not natural in terms of that vista. It's been put there to serve a purpose, and to my mind starts to fundamentally change the vista because we're introducing something to hide. And whilst agricultural buildings, it's absolutely right that they are more harmonious with a rural setting than a caravan. At para 17, that the applicant, the inspector talks about, a structure with a utilitarian, functional design. Well, if there's anything that's not utilitarian and functional, that is, because by definition it has to be. And I'm just really, really not convinced that this is the right thing in the right place, given its impact. I absolutely accept that the applicant is doing as much as it can. I think it's a finely balanced decision as to whether its impact, and I think it becomes a subjective thing about the impact, and I do not at all criticise officers for the judgment they have come to. I think probably before looking at that decision, on balance, I probably would be erring towards supporting officers. But I think we have an inspector's decision that is looking at this general landscape and its impact, and is flagging to us that we need to be really, really, really careful about what we do. And again, I stress I'm not critical of officers, because I think 99 times out of 100, or even 999 of 1,000, I'd be backing you all the way. I think the inspector, albeit it's a caravan, it's not quite on all fours. There's enough in there for me to say there is such sensitivity around this particular landscape that we should be really, really, really cautious. And on that basis, I am going to struggle to support the officer's recommendation, and I would be turning towards the appeal decision, and I'd be, if we get to it, I'd be building reasons for refusal around some of the issues raised in the most recent appeal decision. And again, I take what the planning manager has had to say, but I think that there is something in that, and so for that reason, I would be not supporting officers on this particular occasion. I'll leave it for others on the committee to consider, and I think it's a balanced and could be a rational decision either way.
Chairman,
Thank you. I'll go for Councillor Harvey and then Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on the specific point Councillor Pemberton raised about the screening and whether it's deliberately there, etc., etc. I have in front of me an OS map which is dated 2009, skinflint that I am, but it shows existing a line of trees in exactly that spot. So this is not new screening, this is old screening.
on one hand, you'd argue there's an enhancement of screening. I think perversely, that's there and is natural and is part and parcel of it. We're introducing an additional level, and to me, my concern is the screening in of itself changes the vista. It's close to, and I absolutely accept. You could argue it's dancing on the head of a pin. I've just got some concerns around it, and it may be that I find myself in a minority on that, and that is, as I say, I think there is a rational decision to go either way. But I take your point that I was trying to talk about the screening that it gets brought into play to support the screening of the building itself is a change to the landscape, and I think that itself is something to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a very finely balanced application in front of us. But I do feel that as a planning committee, we have a role to protect our heritage and the rural aspect of what the district has. We are facing continual proposals for solar farms all over the district that are blotting the landscape. They go through because of climate change. I think what's really, really important, what I'm really concerned about is protecting the landscape and the character for my grandchildren to see. Because if we're not careful, we won't have vistas and opportunities to have wonderful views because they'll be cluttered. For me, the appeal decision that was taken last Thursday changes. It brings a different emphasis. And for me, I'm going to propose we refuse on the basis of the impact on the character of the landscape. I think it's a great shame the applicant didn't liaise more with the parish council to look at relocating, the fact that they're located literally a kilometre away from the roads. We're going to have tracks of vehicles, large HGVs. More consideration needs to be made to protecting our landscape. That's it in a nutshell from me. I want to protect our landscape, and I want to protect what we've got. Once it's gone, and we can't do anything more about it. And I do think this appeal decision from last Thursday strengthens our case because it gives a good example. Thank you.
I'll just go to Councillor Hench-Serafin and then Councillor Pember.
Thank you, Chair. I do have concerns with this application. For one, as Councillor Parry has said, the lack of consultation with the parish council, that is imperative in my view. The positioning of this building could have been in a better place. I don't see why it has to be so far from the road at all. So I'm leaning to supporting Councillor Parry on this.
Councillor Pemberton.
Chair, I just wanted to clarify whether Councillor Passingham had actually seconded Councillor Harvey's proposal. I'm certainly in the place of seconding Councillor Parry's proposal, but I wasn't sure where we actually were at, and so I just...
Yeah, I think you're right to clarify that at the moment.
Well, there wasn't a proposal, Chair.
So I understood from what I asked of Councillor Harvey that was taken as a proposal to grant in line with the officer's recommendations.
I said I was prepared to... I said, you can play back the record, I said I was prepared to propose if nobody else wasn't. If nobody else did, I was.
Fine. So on that basis, am I right in assuming that then we haven't had a proposal to grant in line with the officer's recommendations? Okay. In which case, we haven't had a proposal to grant. Therefore, the only proposal so far we've had is from Councillor Parry, which is against officers' recommendations.
And I would be prepared to second that. I think there is probably more debate to be had, having said that.
Thank you for that clarity at this time. Councillor Fleming.
For me, we keep relying on this decision that happened last Thursday, and we've got the planning manager saying that technically it's not relevant because it was a different type of application, it's in a different area and whatever. So I'm in a situation where I kind of agree with the people who say refuse, but at the same time, the reasons that we're being built on to make that refusal don't stand up with the advice from the planning manager. So, so from that perspective, my sort of thoughts are, if we refuse this and they don't build these barns to maintain agriculture, what'll happen? They'll turn it into a flipping solar farm. That's my concern, and that's even worse. So from that perspective, I live in a very rural area where we rely on agriculture. So from that perspective, although it may well impinge and impact the landscape, we are a rural area that depends on agriculture. So I won't be going against the officer's recommendation at this time.
Thank you. I've been listening to the debate and I wanted to sort of gather my thoughts before I sort of waded in myself. I think what Councillor Fleming's just said has solidified my thoughts, and I agree with him very much. I think it is certainly a finely balanced application, and that's been aired very rightly so, particularly in the landscape aspect of it. I am very reticent to rely heavily on the appeal decision that was just heard, and I think you, Councillor Pemberton, aired exactly why that was a risk that would be present in any decision we made on that basis, and that on the basis of what our planning manager has said. For my part, I do appreciate the sensitivity. It is extremely sensitive landscape, but it is also a living landscape, and we have to be aware of that as well. And these are agricultural units, not residential, not caravans. And I think that is pertinent in my mind. So on that basis, I would be in favour of supporting the officer's recommendations. Now, I haven't done the arithmetic in my mind as of yet, but we clearly have a range of opinions across the members who have spoken so far. We do have a proposal to go against the officer's recommendations, which has been seconded. I'm prepared to make a proposal to go along with the officer's recommendations, and I would be seeking a seconder. After, looks like Councillor Harvey might be willing to second. In which basis we have two proposals. The one that was seconded shall be heard first, which is to go against officers' recommendations. I'm happy to hear more from the debate, but clearly we've all aired quite a lot already. I'm just going to speak to our officers very quickly before we proceed.
So the notes I was taking, firstly while Councillor Pemberton spoke and Councillor Parry, if I start with Parry, because I know you proposed, so it's obviously the role to protect heritage and the rural aspect of the district, needing to protect the character of the landscape, and I think Councillor Pemberton made reference to the important vista and view. The landscape is highly sensitive to change. I know we talked about screening. Utilitarian and functional design, not convinced it's the right development in the right place. So what I've taken from that is that members are, or certainly the proposer and the sector, are minded to refuse on the basis of impact on landscape and don't agree with the officer's conclusions in terms of the landscape and AONB. So in terms of specific policies, I think CS5, CS9, CS11 are the core strategy, and then we've got E1 of the NDP, which talks about preserving the skyline, essentially. So just want to check that that's in line with your understanding, and the vote would be on that basis. Brilliant. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for that. Would anyone else like to contribute to the debate before we move to the vote? I'm quite happy to move to the vote. Yeah, okay. Okay, so, and just for clarity, this is 2 applications. Both need a vote, but I'm taking that the proposals and seconds are for both applications, correct? Yes, jolly good. Okay, so the first vote is for refusal of application 22/01485/FUL for the reasons just given from our planning manager. Can I see all those in favour?
4.
Can I see all those opposed? Yeah.
4.
Okay. As chairman, I have the casting vote, in which case that fails. Now, for we move on to the next one, which is proposal to refuse application 22/01486/FUL. Can I see all those in favour?
4.
And opposed?
4.
And same result, in which case casting vote, and that fails. We now move on then to the proposal to grant application 22/01485/FUL for the in line with the officer's recommendations. Yes, Councillor Kempton.
Chair, before you go to the vote, there was question of discussion of negotiation with the chair about the occupation condition, and there was the question of at least a note around a routing strategy. I can read the room, but I think that if we could just make sure those things are picked up.
Thank you. I welcome that interjection, Councillor Pempton. Yes, on that particularly, I did identify condition 9, the wording to be agreed with myself to be in line with the feelings of the committee to restrict any further use of the buildings subject to a Class Q application at the time. And as I also noted, I think a note with regards a routing strategy is appropriate, and I'd seek to have that added on as well, which seems to be agreed by our planning manager. Okay. Can I ask if that was agreed by my seconder? Councillor Harvey? It was. Jolly good, thank you very much. Okay, in which case we can now move on to the vote for recommendation to grant in line with the officer's recommendations for application 22/01485/FUL. Can I see all those in favour?
4.
And against? Sorry.
4.
In which case casting vote from myself is to grant, and for proposal is to grant in line with the officer's recommendations for application 22/01486/FUL. Can I see all those in favour?
4.
And against? Thank you very much. In which case casting vote and application is granted. So committee resolves to grant applications 22/01485/FUL and 22/01486/FUL in line with the officer's recommendations. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll move on then, everybody, to our final application, which is item 5, application 23/02139 FUL, Bromson Hill Farm, Ashbourne, Warwick. Our presenting officer is Sarah Flaherty. Once you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a full planning application for the erection of a replacement dwelling. The application site is located in an open countryside location near Ashbourne, to the south of the M40 and just off the Fossway. Here we see a satellite image of the site. The existing dwelling can be seen here, denoted by the arrow, with agricultural buildings associated with the farm located here to the north-east. Sorry. The proposed site plan can be seen on this slide. A new access is proposed here off the existing farm access, with a parking area located here, proposed dwelling here, and an area for a ground source heat pump located here. The existing trees seen on site boundaries are proposed to be retained. Here we see the proposed floor plans and elevations of the replacement dwelling. The dwelling would be 8.2 metres in height and would have 4 bedrooms. This image is taken facing north up the driveway. The existing dwelling can be seen here behind the oak tree, with some farm buildings seen here to the right. The proposed dwelling will be located on the left of the image in front of this fence. This image is taken facing northwest and shows the existing dwelling this application seeks to replace. One of the agricultural buildings serving the farm can be seen on the right here. This final image is taken facing from the access drive towards the southwest. The proposed dwelling will be located on the right of the image, with the new driveway entering the site just in front of this oak tree here. Chairman, there's a conflict with the principal development, with officers finding that the proposal fails to comply with policies CS20 and AS10 of the core strategy. Landscape harm has also been identified, contrary to policies CS5 and AS10. The recommendation is therefore to refuse the application for the reasons detailed on page 29 of the agenda pack and the updates in the update sheet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, we can move on then to our first speaker, who's Councillor George Struthers of Newbold, Pacey and Ashbourne Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor. You have 3 minutes. I'm happy to give you a 30-second warning before your time is up. It's the button on the right to turn on the microphone, and when you're ready, take it away.
Chairman, Councillors, I'm George Struthers, current Chairman of the Newbold, Pacey and Ashbourne Parish Council. I should also declare that my family and I are amongst the closest neighbours to Bromson Hill Farm, but I do not know the applicant and have only met the current occupant of the farm, Mr. Tim Morland, on one occasion, and again tonight, when visiting with fellow councillors. The Council undertook a site visit to Bromson Hall Farm on Tuesday the 22nd of August 2023, and you are in receipt of our deliberations dated 6 September 2023. I'm sure that you've all read them, or at least I hope you have. The concerns of the Parish Council are as follows. The current farmhouse is in a very poor state and needs to be demolished. It is also in close proximity to a very large barn and a very active working farm. Any farmyard is a dangerous place, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, especially for children. With 3 children under 6, the Parish Council thinks it necessary that any replacement dwelling should provide sufficient distance to allow separation from the working farm, for both safety and amenity for play during the building of the new dwelling and after completion. This will enhance their physical and mental well-being. The siting of the new building without the current curtilage is, in the view of the Parish Council, justified to fulfil the needs of safety and amenity. Bromson Hill Farm is a busy, modern farm which is developing and should be assisted to do so. It deserves a mature, modern farmhouse, and provision of solar panels and ground source heat pumps will add additional benefits in terms of renewable energy. With regard to scenic matters, the Parish Council considers that the construction of the new dwelling will not adversely affect the landscape nature of the area. The farm is bounded by the B4100 Warwick-Banbury Road to the north. Whilst the farm is clearly visible, the farmhouse is not, and we consider that the new farmhouse will not be also. From the south, the farm is bounded by the road from the Harbury House roundabout to the Ashorn Crossroads. I live to the south of the road. I cannot see the farm or farmhouse. I consider it unlikely that I will or would be able to see the new farmhouse either. Any motorist travelling on this road is unlikely, in our view, to see either the house or the farm. The only true perspective would be produced by a drone, which would reveal a working farm and farmhouse within the farmland that they are managing. This application has the full support of the Newbold, Pacey and Ashorn Parish Council for the construction of a new farmhouse plus the demolition of the existing farmhouse. On behalf of the Parish Council, I commend this application to you for your approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Well within your time. Members, do we have any questions for our Parish Council representative this evening? Nothing forthcoming, in which case thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, we'll now move on then to our next speaker, who is Tim Morland, the applicant. Good evening, Mr. Morland. So you also have 3 minutes. I'm happy to give you a 30-second warning before your time's up. Otherwise, once you're ready, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm the occupier partner in the farming business, which is owned by my grandfather, the land. I'm pleased to note the planners accept the principle of the replacement dwelling, given the structural issues we have with the existing dwelling. I appreciate the planners will wish to stick to the black and white of the policy. I'm a farmer who wants to offer the best quality of life for my young family. I've got 3 children under the age of 6 who enjoy spending a lot of time outdoors. We've made it a safe area for them to explore and develop without worry of being able to them being able to get to the dangerous working areas a few yards away, including installing a taller fence with small mesh they cannot climb over to prevent them from being able to come into the working yard without supervision. We don't get a lot of family time, parks and days out, as the farm's busy, leading to long, irregular hours. So they have lots of toys, entertainment outdoors, and they can come and go from the house by the front door as they please, safely and securely. While I accept that what is proposed, the replacement dwelling is outside of the residential curtilage. Policy CS20 does allow for this if there are environmental benefits. We farm in excess of 700 cattle, produce a great deal of smells and noise from the agricultural operations. Currently, the house is adjacent to the farmyard, with buildings adjoining. The new house will create, with buildings adjoining. The house, which creates many significant environmental and health issues. Simply moving the house a short distance away will not help this. Positioning the house in the proposed location will allow my family and I to have a better standard of living and benefit the health of my children. The development may take us several years, and I do not want the safety and development of my children to be affected from the loss of the garden during the building process. Parish Council and local councillors visited the site. They've seen the farming operations, and they've both understood my reasoning and agree that the position offers substantial environmental benefits over the existing house. The proposed location would still remain close to the existing farmyard, as such would be seen as part of this group of buildings when viewed as a part of the wider landscape. The report to the Planning Committee draws attention to the size of the red line. Please note this was a requirement by the Council in order for our application to be validated, rather than something we proposed. To maximise the use of renewable energy technologies, the new house will allow us to use ground source heat pumps and solar panels. And along with the upgrades in building materials, this will allow us to be self-sufficient, as most self-sufficient as possible. At the request of the planning officer, a tree survey was undertaken, and to avoid damaging or mutilating trees, we moved the position of the proposed dwelling to the position now being discussed, whereas building in the garden would require the removal of trees and shrubs that are valuable. The proposed...
I'll ask you to just try and wrap up now, if that's right.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry. Thank you very much for your contribution. If you stay seated just for a second, I'm just going to see if any of our members have any questions for you. Councillor Harvey. Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Borland. I'm going to, would you indulge me a moment? I'm going to read to you a piece of what some people regard as planning gobbledygook, but I want you to listen carefully. This is taken from AS10, the policy that deals with countryside and villages, and it reads, the following forms of development and uses in the countryside are acceptable in principle, and then one of them is, paragraph I, a permanent dwelling for occupation by a person engaged in an agricultural operation or other form of use that can only reasonably be carried out in the countryside, subject to a functional need being established. Does that describe you?
Yeah, I think it probably does.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for applicants? No, I don't believe so, in which case thank you very much for your contribution this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on then to our final speaker, Ward Member Councillor Parry. Good evening, Councillor. You've 5 minutes. Again, happy to give you a 30-second warning, but once you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. I am fully in support of this application for the following material planning reasons. There is no harm to the character of the area, and the proposed location site for a new replacement dwelling is not visible from any neighbouring properties or the highway, and therefore accords with CS5. The proposal conforms to CS9 in respect of its design and distinctiveness, as the proposed new replacement dwelling would enhance the sense of place and reflect the character and distinctiveness of the locality. Policy CS20 advises that replacement dwellings are not inappropriate, providing the existing dwelling is not considered suitable for retention. A site visit and inspection of the existing property this afternoon will have provided committee members with the evidence that the building is not fit for purpose, nor able to be refurbished in view of the failing structural condition as confirmed by the structural report the applicant provided. The proposed dwelling reflects a reduction in its built form of 23 square metres, and therefore as a replacement dwelling would not be causing inappropriate harm to the character of the area or to neighbouring properties as permitted according to policy AS10 paragraph F. The proposed new dwelling accords with CS2 and includes renewable energy from sources of solar panels and a ground source heat pump, providing a significant reduction in carbon emissions. The replacement dwelling at Bromson Hill Farm accords with CS1 and is therefore a sustainable development in line with the NPPF. Whilst it is acknowledged that the location for the proposed replacement dwelling is adjacent to the residential curtilage of the existing dilapidated farmhouse, it is essential that consideration is given to the overall planning balance in respect to this application for the aforementioned policies and also due to the following significant issues. It would be totally inappropriate to demolish the current farmhouse and replace with a new dwelling which abuts the working agricultural farm buildings in view of significant environmental and health issues affecting a very young family. The location of a replacement dwelling close to agricultural buildings used for cattle and feed storage at a highly active working farm that expels continuous and significant noise and odours represents a totally inappropriate living environment. Locating the living accommodation a short distance away from the working farm would create a much improved living environment for the farmer and his very young family. It would also enable the farmer to expand his agricultural business and increase the size of his livestock and storage barns. In addition, locating a replacement dwelling with the confines of the residential garden would significantly reduce the size of the garden amenity space for the dwelling and its young family. Common sense needs to be applied in this case, as the combination of all these factors point in favour of granting planning permission for the new dwelling in its proposed location. The current 19th century farmhouse is extremely dilapidated, and certainly a new dwelling in the open countryside with an agricultural tie would be granted straight away in the proposed location under AS10. So I do urge members to vote with both their head and heart for the young growing family. In addition, there is no objection from WCC and no change to the existing weight collection service currently in operation. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parry. Members, do we have any questions for our ward member? No, nothing forthcoming, in which case thank you very much. Okay, we now move on then to points of clarification from our officers. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify the question of the residential curtilage? The applicant has indicated a red line, which is a red line boundary for planning purposes. Are officers able to confirm, what the land registry identifies as the residential curtilage? Part of my confusion is, unless I'm misreading that, the access seems to go up and then dogleg left into the property, which would seem to indicate that the residential curtilage is not just the top left-hand box, if you will. So I just want to try and get some understanding of, because the applicant seemed to allude to that it was a technicality that it was outside the residential curtilage by virtue of the red line boundary, rather than, the actual residential curtilage, if you were buying or selling the farmhouse. And I just wonder whether officers can help me with that.
Thank you. So the red line was amended to include both the land covered by the existing dwelling and the proposed dwelling. It was all the land covered by the development had to be included within the red line. That was why that was requested. Yeah. So our understanding is it's this rectangle at the top that is the garden land associated with the existing dwelling. This is obviously the red line for the application. So if members were to grant permission tonight, this would effectively be the extent of the garden land associated with the dwelling. That's why we've recommended condition number 10, the submission of a plan denoting the specific extent of that garden land, because we would have concerns, I think I've raised this in the report, if the new dwelling had a garden land that was of this size, if that makes sense. Yeah. There was a question that came up at the site visit earlier. This sort of reverse L shape that would be the proposed site is 3,680 square metres. This rectangle at the top is 1,621 square metres. So that's somewhat in excess of the recommended garden sizes. I think it's 62 square metres for a 4-bed dwelling. Hopefully that answers your question somewhat.
Councillor Harvey.
Page 25 of the papers refers to CS20 and provides an extract which reads, replacement dwellings should be sited within the lawful curtilage of the existing dwelling unless significant environmental benefits would result. I note that the extract uses the word should be cited, not must be cited. And secondly, my compact Oxford English Dictionary defines significant as important or large enough to be noticed. So would I be right in thinking that a significant environmental benefit of this project would be the environmental benefits, i.e. the climate change factors that are being met, e.g. the ground source heat pump? Would that not qualify as being large enough to be noticed, and therefore the curtilage requirement need not apply?
Thank you, Councillor. I would refer you to the two paragraphs down, where I make an assessment of whether these the benefits of the application would constitute significant benefits, and I've concluded that they wouldn't. I said that the environmental benefits of the sustainability benefits that would arise would be small scale and would not meet the significant threshold in officers' assessment.
All I can say is my definition from my Oxford English Dictionary is important or large enough to be noticed.
I think that's obviously up to members to decide. I think in ordinary reading of the policy, significant is quite a high bar to meet. That's all I'd say.
Thank you. I actually have a question myself. Reference has been made to AS10I, I think, with regards to agricultural accommodation. Whereas what we're looking at the moment is replacement dwelling, which I understand would be open market. Are those two policy points mutually exclusive? As in, could it be the case that we would have a replacement dwelling that would be an agricultural dwelling, or can they not work together?
I think in some instances on a farm you might have an existing dwelling that has an agricultural tie, and then they might be proposing a replacement. In this instance, the existing dwelling, as Councillor Parry mentioned, dates to the 19th century, so as we understand there isn't an agricultural tie on this dwelling. It's been submitted as a replacement dwelling under CS20 and AS10, and it's been assessed as such, so officers don't consider that it would meet the tests to have the agricultural tie added, even though, as you say, it would be an open market dwelling, but we understand the applicant would be sort of a farmer living there, but we still don't think that that condition would be reasonable, unless Alice has anything to add on that.
No, I concur. I think the point is because the existing dwelling doesn't have an agricultural tie on it, to then restrict the new one when they haven't applied for that type of development, to my mind, would be unreasonable, which would fail to meet one of the condition tests.
Thank you. Councillor Councillor Fleming next, and
then... just a question, and I know we can only vote on what we've got in front of us. Should this proposed dwelling be built, what's the danger of us getting an application in to refurbish the old one and then sell off the new one? That's the only thing, I think, my only concern about this.
So if you take a look at recommended, sorry, there's not a recommended condition 11. This is a condition I would recommend, which I've numbered 11. We would put a condition on saying that the existing dwelling should be demolished within 3 months of occupation of the replacement dwelling. That's a standard condition when the footprints don't overlap for dwellings.
Councillor Pempton.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just come back to you made reference to the size of the garden, and the question of, a significant expansion of domestic garden versus farm. Would your assessment change if there was some condition that restricted, or is it possible to restrict the size of the garden? Because I take your point that in essence it creates a huge, and I'm just trying to, it seems what they've done is they've fitted around rather than necessarily, looking for. So would your assessment be different if the site was partitioned differently?
I think, to answer your question, I would say that officers did suggest that the dwelling could be located within the existing garden lands, perhaps down here or something, and the applicant didn't take up that suggestion. So I think a condition wouldn't, obviously I'm recommending refusal, it wouldn't necessarily overcome the issue because it still would be outside the existing garden land.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. Would this set a precedence being outside of the curtilage for other applications to come along? I've got no objection about the rebuild of the house, but this is going, and if it's not an agricultural building, it's in open countryside, isn't it? I just want to know, would it set a precedence?
You'll have heard this line a lot, every application on its own merits, but we still have to be conscious when we're making decisions that they don't set a precedent. I think there is a danger that if we were to say that the environmental benefits set out are significant enough, that that bar isn't hugely high, particularly if we're focusing on the sustainability aspects, because then anyone could come in and basically say, we'll do these sustainability measures, that's significant enough to justify a house outside the curtilage. Obviously, in this case, we do also have the arguments advanced by the applicant in terms of the proximity of the house to the farm. And I think that's probably quite niche and not hugely repeatable across the district. So that aspect, I think, would be less dangerous in terms of setting a precedent, if that answers the question.
Councillor Pemberton.
Apologies, some of this is becoming sequential and a train of thought. It's just another thing that something else comes to mind. You rightly pointed that we could not have an agricultural tie as such. However, a condition around linking the property to the use of the farm, could we construct something, I think, in other words, the residential element is inextricably linked to the operation of the farm. It's not I'm not looking at a tie, but I think, again, it's this question about when we find applications where the rationale is and the appeal decision in the previous one was the rationale was, the functional use of a caravan to support an agricultural business, and that kind of notion. Is there anything in your professional opinion around devising a condition that could restrict, because I think, again, officers having a mind towards, this just becomes an open market dwelling, it's inside the curtilage, and there are some risks, and I note the parish council and ward members' support, but there are some risks around that. So mitigating those risks, is there anything that you could advise the committee around any form of condition?
I would, as you say, for the reasons I've set out, I don't think an agricultural tie would be appropriate. I think what I would say is I'd struggle to think of what a policy hook would be in terms of tying the house to the existing farm holding next door, because it would essentially then be an agricultural tie condition. So we'd be effectively doing the same thing. I think what I come back to in looking at this application is that it is an open market house at the moment. So subject to that condition, if members were minded to grant to demolish the existing house, we wouldn't have a net increase of houses in an unsustainable location. So we're not as officers concerned about that aspect, it's just the siting. So I think hopefully that should give some reassurance were members minded to grant.
Any further points of clarification for our officers? No, in which case we can move to debate. Who would like to start? Interesting one. Keep naturally looking over on this side, but I think I'll go with this side for a change. Who would like to start? Councillor Fleming.
I'll go first for a change. Yeah, thanks for that. Struggling to find a reason to say, to agree with the officer on this. I'm sort of wholly minded. I mean, we talk about the big garden. All his children are under 6. When they're all teenagers, he's going to need a big garden. So, from that perspective, it's an improvement to the farmsteading. It keeps the guy as a farmer for a very long time. We need to promote agriculture in this area. We've already had a discussion similar to that earlier. It's an active livestock farm. It's what this area is sort of noted for. I would be going against the officer's recommendation as we stand. Not a proposal, but that's how I feel at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Who would like to go next? Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Chairman. Logic is a funny thing. I totally accept that this is in the open countryside, and therefore the presumption is generally against. However, the practicalities of this particular house, the existing house, are such that it needs to be pulled down. it doesn't provide the sort of accommodation that you and I would want to live in, Chairman. I think that the proposal is totally reasonable. It reinforces a business, a successful business. It provides accommodation which is not disproportional. I accept that the plot is large, but so what? Common sense to me says that this is an application which, if it was tied, we would be saying yes to it. I know we're not tying it. It is an open market, but I think in these circumstances, and I do accept that you can stretch significant beyond breaking point, but nevertheless, it's a point worth making. I'm in the same camp as Councillor Fleming that despite the arguments that the officers have put forward, my sympathy lies with granting this application.
Thank you. Councillor Passingham next.
We've recently rejected applications because just a small part of the garden went into open countryside, so this would be inconsistent with that. And I can't see why the new proposed dwelling can't be as far away from the farm as possible, but just inside the existing curtilage, and you could still have the ground source heat pump and all the environmental benefits. And the safety measures probably need to be put in place anyway because it's a farm, but children have grown up on farms for centuries and they're still doing it all over the country. So I'm minded to reject the application on those grounds.
Thank you, Councillor.
Right, sorry. Support the officers, so whichever. Yeah. So is that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No. Got you. Thank you. Anyone want to follow up on that, or am I going to lend my points to it? I'm falling on the side of Councillor Passingham, but I'd like to at least elaborate on why. I think a lot of this is absolutely acceptable in a number of ways. The issue I have is the technicalities that's got us to where we are that's making it unacceptable. I think we've explored those quite thoroughly with our officers. And ultimately, it's what one of my predecessors has said in the past, if it's not right, it's wrong. I think there's a few tweaks to this would make it perfectly acceptable. But at the moment, we haven't got those. What we have in front of us is a red line boundary which is far larger than the curtilage as it exists. No clarification on what would happen to that land in total. And the fact that it is an open market dwelling as a result of the existing extant permission does make an issue in terms of policy. I've got a strong sense of feeling that I want to grant this because I completely support the ideals of the applicant and their aspirations for their family. I think it's absolutely fine to position it slightly further away from the farm to try and improve their own personal environment. I don't, however, feel that we have a policy hook to actually justify what's in front of us. It's not something I'm happy about. I strongly recommend the applicant take this away, make some changes and come back before us so that we can grant something a bit more in line with policy. At the moment, I can't see it. And so I'm in line with going in line with the officer's recommendations, but expecting this to come back so that we can approve it in a reformed state. That's my feeling. I know we haven't had any proposals as of yet. I don't believe there were the speeches by members who are in favour of this have offered firm policy grounds to go against officers' recommendations. If they have them, I would invite them to bring them forward now. Otherwise, we're going to have to look at proposals which do have policy basis and go from there. I'll open it up to the floor. Otherwise, we'll.
Can I ask a question then of paragraph I of AS 10? Why can't we justify granting on the basis of paragraph I? Is it simply because the words as written in paragraph I do not say tied and agricultural. It merely says permanent dwelling for occupation by a person engaged in an agricultural operation, which the applicant certainly is. So my justification would be paragraph I of AS10. Apart from, of course, just to say it, ward members' strong support, and as strong support from a parish council as I've ever heard for an application.
I think, as we've discussed, it hasn't been assessed on the basis of an application for a rural worker. You'll see that I does require a functional need to be established. Now, we know the existing occupant is a farmer, but we haven't had any evidence to confirm that there's a functional need for an agricultural workers dwelling. They're quite fairly applying for a replacement dwelling. I think, listening to the debate, it seems to me that members have identified, those who are minded to grant, have identified that there are significant benefits to resiting the dwelling outside of the curtilage. So that brings us back to CS20. So if members were so minded to go down that route, I think that would be more justifiable in terms of, obviously, officers' assessment is that the sustainability benefits and moving it away from the farm, the active farm, is not significant enough to meet that test required by CS20, but members are within their rights to come to a different conclusion on that subject. I'd strongly err away from recommending grant on the basis of it being an agricultural workers dwelling if we're not tying it. And I think if we're tying it, then that would be unreasonable in terms of a condition.
Is it open to the applicant to come back with a revised application which asks for it to be tied?
The difficulty with that is they'd have to evidence the need for they basically need to show financial viability, that the farm is financially stable enough to be able to support a dwelling on the site. Now, that just wouldn't be logical because there's an existing open market dwelling on the site. So it would be a lot of work for the applicant to go through. We'd have to get it independently assessed by an agricultural consultant to confirm that there's a need for an agricultural dwelling. They may come back and say there's not, but actually there's already a dwelling on the site anyway. So we're in a bit of a awkward situation there. So I'd strongly suggest no. I think they've done the correct course of action in applying for a replacement dwelling.
Councillor Pemberton?
Thank you. I think I'm not. I think if members want to advance the proposition to grant, it's got to be on the basis of a different assessment of CS20 and using decision makers' prerogative. I don't think, because I think we've tested to destruction whether we can find a way of shoehorning it in with a policy hook. I'm with the chair that I don't think there is. I think that he and I and the rest of the committee are looking for reasons to grant this, because I think that overall we feel there is I think the mood of the committee would be to find a way, and it may be that if it fails at this point, something whereby it at least 2/3 straddles the sort of curtilage kind of a thing, gets the applicant home. I suspect it probably would, because I think it gives more weight in CS20 because, it's not absolutely outside the curtilage. So I think if members are looking to find reasons, they've just got to hang their hat on a different assessment of CS20 to that taken by the officers. And that is for each individual member to come to. I have concerns, but bluntly, I'd like to find a way to grant it, but I do have concerns about the lack of a policy hook. But I wouldn't die in a ditch if other members took a different view of assessing CS20. I'm not sure that's helpful for anybody, but I think it only in the sense of if the committee's going down this route, it's on their assessment of being different to officers.
Thank you, Councillor Pemberton. I mean, we're otherwise at an impasse unless somebody makes a proposition. I'm looking around the room, otherwise I'm going to have to make a proposal to refuse in line with officer's recommendations, which I will do, and seek a seconder. I would add at this point, thank you, Councillor Pemberton. I will add at this point that I completely support this application coming back before us, but in a revised form that is more acceptable. I think there's things that can be done to it that would not make a huge material difference to what the applicants put together, but in terms of policy, we have these policies for a reason. Councillor Hench-Serafin did raise the point of precedent, which I do think is relevant here, and you know it's a very awkward one, but I think that we all want it to succeed, and it just needs to be done in the right way to do so. Okay, so that's where we're at. Unless anyone else would like to speak, Councillor Fleming.
Are there sufficient grounds to defer us to let him come back with a revised thing, or do we have to go one way or the other with what we've done?
I think at this point the changes that I foresee and the officers seem to agree with would require an adequately different scheme, albeit that it would be a change to the red line boundary and etc. I don't think the actual scheme itself would be materially hugely different, but obviously it would have to be different enough to have a reapplication. So that seems to be where we're at. If no one else would like to contribute, then we have a proposal to refuse in line with officer's recommendations. Can I see all those in favour, please?
5.
And against?
1.
And abstentions?
1.
Okay, in which case committee resolves to refuse application 23/02139/FUL. Okay, we move on then. Item 6, urgent business. No urgent business, in which case meeting closed. Thank you.